Hello! I wanted to talk in this segment about some of the writing tips that we've covered in the textbook. So in chapter 7, we looked previously at organization and clarity and the like for writing business communication. I also asked you to read chapter 6 for this week, which has a lot of the tips for organization, for clarity, infrastructure that we'll be using actually throughout the semester, even if the chapter title is Online Environment. And let's face it, most business communication is conducted via online communications. And so understanding how to best communicate using text and or visuals in online environments is pretty key to what we'll be doing for the rest of the semester. So there are a few things that show up in the chapter worth taking a look at. So first, writing concisely. These are some of the best tips that any writer can benefit from. Paragraphing, right? Cover one idea in a paragraph. Begin each paragraph with a topic sentence. Now, this is kind of basic writing instruction, but it's amazing how quickly we fall away from that if we're not paying attention to it. We'll talk about that in a little bit more. Limit each paragraph to 3 or 4 sentences. Well, it's not like you need to have a rule of thumb where you count out each sentence and say, okay, the paragraph is done. Remember the one idea, one paragraph rule. But do try to keep the paragraphs brief. This has a number of advantages, and we'll take a look at that in a little bit as well. Aim for short sentences with simple sentence structure. Concrete nouns, active verbs. So you want your sentences to be concise and precise. Clarity often requires that we write a fair amount because you want to make sure that all of the information that's required is present in the sentence. However, in revision, you also want to make sure that there's no unnecessary language in the sentence. You want to revise to eliminate redundancy for phrases or sentences that aren't actually doing any good work for you. And, keep an eye out for any sentences that replicate functions that are already accomplished by other elements of the communication that you are working up. And use plain language. As often as possible, try to be straightforward. Use common, everyday words. Try not to, fancy up your prose with a thesaurus or the like. Use words that you're comfortable using. This does also require, though, that you understand the language of the field and that you demonstrate a facility in the kinds of terms and ideas that are used in the type of writing in the field that you are engaged in. All right, let's use this as an example. In today's day and age, there is an issue with social media and teens regarding the toxicity teens face. So the goal here is to be clear, to be precise, to eliminate unnecessary information, and to ensure that all necessary information for full understanding is present. And so in revision, to begin with, phrases like in today's day and age and the like would simply be eliminated. There's absolutely no use for them. There is an issue is too vague and unclear to be used here. We want to define the issue. So we get social media and teens and toxicity, and we want to narrow in and focus on that as the point that we're trying to make. Voila! Teens face a toxic social media environment. That's the point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 words. Let's go a little further. There is heavy research that shows how social media, specifically Instagram, is toxic for teens and causes great damage to teens' lives. Well, I recommend using Spell Checker if you're not in Word. Grammarly is also an excellent service, free of charge. I don't necessarily recommend the premium version. I think the free version is fine. So use the spell and grammar check of your word processing software. Use Grammarly. Use whatever tools are at your disposal. You may have been told in the past to avoid these tools because of false positives, blah 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 blah, and sometimes the corrections are inaccurate, whatever. Nonsense. They're very sophisticated. They're very helpful. They're not always right, but it's up to you to kind of make that discernment. Capitalized Instagram. It is a brand name. If you set off a phrase, it's called a positive phrase with a comma at the start, make sure that you put the comma at the close. Research shows social media, specifically Instagram, is toxic for teens and causes great damage to teens' lives. Well, we already got toxic for teens, so we can take that out. Use active verbs. Damages teens' lives. Of course, there's also missing information here. What is toxic about Instagram? How does it damage teens' lives? These are important details to include. So now these first two sentences are models for the kinds of sentences you should be striving for in your revision. Teens face a toxic social media environment. Research shows that social media, specifically Instagram, damages teens' lives. There you go. There's a demonstration of the need for an even further revision, a final revision that allows you to pick up any typos or additional changes that need to be made to make sure your corrections conform to the surrounding language. Next in the chapter is chunking content, which I'll also call using paragraphs effectively. So as the text here says, a way to focus reader attention is to break up dense blocks of text into short paragraphs. That's key, right? We don't want dense blocks of texts. We want short paragraphs so that they stand out and can be quickly scanned and absorbed. This is also why you want to make sure there's a topic sentence at the top of the paragraph. Now, this says that in the business world and the professional world, people may not read every single word of a document. This is true in real life, in all life. You want to make sure that your documents can be read word for word productively, but you also want to make sure that they can be scanned quickly productively. And the way we do that is to break things into short paragraphs, make sure that the point of the paragraph is at the very top of the paragraph so a reader can read the first sentence in every paragraph down the page and still understand what it is you're trying to do, and then realize whether or not they want to go back through and read word for word and get more detail. So for example, here is a dense block of text. So in writing an essay for expository writing or for research writing or academic writing, this is fine. In professional business correspondence, this is not fine. This is too much text in a single paragraph. You need to break it up into smaller units so it can be read quickly, easily, and with benefit. In order to break it up, all you have to do is kind of figure out where each of the main points are that you want to emphasize. So this first point, I've asked the class to work together to reduce waste by switching out plastic disposals for reusable products. Okay, good, clear enough. That's a point. And then a little further along, we get a new point here. In order to research this further, I will utilize the Rutgers Library resources to include more facts and statistics in my report. Well, yes, obviously, that's a good point to break, but, this is not really detailed enough to give me a sense of how these resources will, what facts will be included or the like. But obviously the effort is to be convincing, right, and the like. Third point. A big part of why people make wasteful decisions is that they sometimes see these decisions as the easier choice. Excellent, good. One thing I want to point out, though, in terms of revision, look out for those commas and try to eliminate unnecessary commas that might sneak into little places. Don't put a comma between the subject and verb of your sentence. The subject here is a big part of why people make wasteful decisions. The verb is. There's no need for a comma there. So here we are. 3 easy chunks. I've asked the class to work together to reduce waste. I will use the library to find statistics to help people convince people to join my efforts. And a big part of why people make wasteful decisions is they sometimes see these decisions as an easier choice. So this is now easier to read. It's also easier to revision because now the writer can see that the points being made here are not sufficient and needs more work to kind of detail what the writer anticipates doing in order to change people's minds to get them to see that a wasteful decision is not the easier choice. So one way to highlight information is to break things into paragraphs so that the reader can see at the top of that paragraph the main point that you want to emphasize. You can also, and should be from this point on, in the memo and the letter, using other ways to highlight information such as headings and subheadings, and where possible, bulleted and numbered lists. I'm not going to require lists for the memo. You should be considering them for the letter if possible. We'll certainly be working with them when we get to the report and the proposal. We've talked about subject headings. Those are in effect the title of the document you're producing, and everything has titles. Everything has headings. Email should have a subject heading. Memo should have a subject heading. Reports, proposals, all of that. Even letters have a regards line, which defines the main topic that they are conveying. So you should get into the habit of identifying a useful, short, but descriptive title for everything that you write. You may want to consider using subheadings, for all of the information that follows. Often introductory sections don't require a subheading. You can simply dive right into the matter and then subhead what falls below, but you can still use a subhead for your intro too. Once again, brief, but also make sure it's descriptive, that there's sufficient detail in there to describe the content of what will follow. Your subheadings and your lists and the like should use the same kind of attention that the details in your resume did. Pay attention to grammatical parallelism. Also make sure that the formatting is consistent. Voila, and we're done. Reducing plastic waste, locating convincing statistics and information, changing people's behavior. Now this block of text is much easier to read quickly and profitably. So let's return to organization. One of the most important things to remember in these shorter documents is that your purpose in writing needs to be identified immediately in that first sentence. All of the important information should go up top if possible. Remember back to the cover letter. The first sentence in the cover letter should indicate that you are applying for the job and where you located the job advertisement. The same is true for the email and the memo. In the very first sentence, you want to explain to the reader what the point is that you're trying to make. What is your purpose in writing to them? The inverted pyramid is a way to organize the entire document. It's a reminder that your most important information should come up top and then supporting information below, so that the first opening paragraph will clearly announce the topic that you are trying to convince your classmates to join you on for a project. The middle paragraph, the body, that will give points and details, the hows, the whys, and the whens and the like, is supporting information, and should include the detail that helps justify, explain, and flesh out that major purpose. And then the closing ends with conventional language, goodwill, and a final effort to get people on board, and should be clear in what it is that you expect the readers to do following reading the message. What's the next step once they're done reading what you have to say to them? So let's take a quick look. Okay, let's talk structure and organization really quick. Like letters, emails should begin with a salutation. They should also close with a closing, even if it's evident from the email address who is sending the email. You still need to write out your name in case there's any ambiguity or lack of clarity between how the email address plays out and what your name is. They're frequently not identical, so even if it is clear in the email what your name is, you should still sign so that it is absolutely clear who you are and what your name is. You may have noted that many people include material after their name, such as further contact information, job titles, employer, and the like, if they're sending an official communication. If you've received an email from me from my Rutgers email account, you'll note that it has the full roll call of my titles and positions, as well as contact information, department information, and the like. In your cases, that's not necessary, but you may want to be paying attention to it so that when the time comes for you to build your own signature block for your email, you understand the conventions involved. In terms of the inverted pyramid, then, you want to begin the email with your most important information. This email does not yet. So, a lot of this can just simply be removed. However, it also needs to be reorganized. The key information that the writer wants to convey is that personal information is being sold by large internet companies. Okay, this video is already too long. I know, I'm sorry. I promise I'll make the next two shorter to make up for it. In any case, let's take a quick look at a pretty good example of the email genre. And yeah, the other examples we looked at, they were good too. This one is just perhaps a little further along in the process, so you can use it to get a sense of where you should be aiming for. I'll point out the nice organization of the sentences. We have some very strong topic sentences. There's a dire public need to fix the work hiring process. This type of hiring actually affects people like us, students going into the workforce. And so I want to highlight here the persuasiveness of this move that brings the audience into the issue by identifying the audience's own connections to that issue. You may want to consider persuasive moves that you could be making that would help bring your audience into the topic that you wanted to describe by highlighting how they may already be concerned with it or areas that they may be aware of that should make them concerned about it. Remember to keep your audience, the reader, in mind throughout as you're writing so that you can be consistently reaching out toward them. Pyramid structure is also excellent. It identifies the main issue, describes the problems, and then in the body it offers more detail as well as issues that bring the reader into the topic, and then has some really nice concrete steps that is recommending be the consideration for how to respond to and remedy this problem with the class project. Very nice, concise, tight, 3 paragraphs. It is lacking a salutation, although it does have an appropriate closing and signature. If I were going to say what else does it need to do, well, it is kind of bumping right up against the top limit of the word count. Now you notice on the assignment, for this assignment, I have a minimum and a maximum word count that I've introduced with this assignment. The minimum word count is important, probably the most important. I want to make sure you're able to fully flesh out and complete the work of what I've asked you to do. But take a look too at the maximum word count. That may be less important and may be less emphasis in the grading, but you should realize too that these assignments are meant to target a specific length of document. And so my recommendation to this student would be to whittle things down a little bit. And we can see right away, oh, the grammar checker has, for me, already identified that in today's society is not concise language. And they recommend going today. I recommend deleting it entirely. That is a much more energetic and useful sentence than the one before.